In the last episode, I had a chat with Wade Brown, VP of Marketing at CBDMD, and we talked about how to scale with AppLovin, the do's, the don'ts, and well, the why. Now, today on episode number 65, get ready. We've got Aaron Zagha, who's the CMO at Newton, a baby sleep brand. And well, today he's going to be sharing some influencer marketing secrets that's helped scale Newton. And well, I'm your host, Raphael Paulin-Daigle, and I'm the founder of SplitBase. This is Minds of eCommerce. Now, this episode is brought to you by SplitBase. At SplitBase, we help leading 8 and 9-figure brands such as Dr Squatch, Once Upon a Farm, Hyperice, and the Mika grow through customer-focused conversion optimization programs. What that means is we find out where your website is leaking money, where the opportunities are at, and then, well, we help you fix it through A/B testing, ongoing optimization, new landing pages, and conversion-focused design. The result, well, you get increased conversions, higher AOV, and of course, more money, which in return allows you to scale advertising profitably. We've been at it for over a decade and can help you manage a CRO process from A to Z. So if you want to learn more, go to splitbase.com today and see how we can help you get the most out of your marketing spend. All right, Aaron, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks. Good to be here.
Yeah, so you're a CMO at Newton, and you guys have had quite a bit of success with influencer marketing. Now, there's about a million ways of doing it, channel specific or not. I'd love to maybe just get some context. What is influencer marketing for you? How do you do it at Newton? And then we're going to dive into, well, I guess your secrets.
Sounds good. So early in our evolution as a company, and pretty much right when I came on board, we really started experimenting with influencers or creators. Just the nature of the channel makes it really relevant to our customer journey. Our customer tends to be a first-time parent. They really have no idea what to buy, what products are reliable, what really makes the safest possible sleep environment for a baby. And as such, they tend to follow people that they respect and trust. And when one of those people recommends a product as being, particularly safe, backed by science, reliable, I think it tends to have an outsized impact on that customer buying journey. So that was the thesis. We leaned into influencer marketing early on. And it definitely worked out. And when we talk about influencers or creators, we actually kind of refer to the full gamut of both size and scale. So everything from micros with maybe 700 followers that we're just gifting product to, who come to us inbound and reach out and say, hey, can we work with your brand? Up through macros who we're paying north of 5 figures to share, whatever the content is or to discuss the product. And we run all the different channels a little bit differently. So the micros that are inbound, we tend to handle mostly in-house. The macros through a larger agency. We do work with creators across almost all channels. The primarily on Instagram is our largest, but we do also work on YouTube, TikTok, a little Pinterest even, and we'll kind of experiment wherever we think it's relevant. So we run them 7 different ways, both in-house and through an agency. But yeah, at the core is really the fact that we run it like a performance channel, and we measure and track everything that we possibly can. And that goes back into who we work with and how much we pay.
Awesome. Measure and track. I think I'd love to go a little deeper because, that is so important. I'm also an analytics guy, so I'd love to know. In your case, obviously, when it comes to influencer marketing, I've heard it often that some brands don't find it super clear as to what exactly should they measure. What's vanity, what's useful, and then how do you best use that data? So, if you were to kind of guide a brand that's either starting with influencer marketing or scaling with influencer marketing, what are the critical metrics to track to really evaluate the health of an influencer program?
Yeah, and I think this is unfortunately where art comes into the equation. I'm a science guy, I'm a quantity guy, my background's in investment banking. So I like the math, and I wish it was, last click attributable with,
Yep.
geo holdout lift tests available, but unfortunately none of that works for an influencer. So I think the answer is you track everything you possibly can. And for us, that means from a tracking perspective, not necessarily from a screening perspective. That's a bit of a different analysis we could talk about in a second. But once we agree to work with a creator, we track everything you can. So that's views of the content, that's clicks if there's a link, like on Instagram stories, for example. We provide every creator with their own unique code, generally speaking, especially on the macro side. So we look at code redemptions on orders. We also, in our how did you hear post-purchase analysis, we allow customers to write in the actual individual creator name, which they often do because they want their person to get credit, which is great.
Yep.
We also customize email and SMS signups per creator so that we can then track any future email or SMS revenue back to the creator as well. So really everything we can possibly do to track, we track.
Got it. Now, I'm also curious here. Well, of a couple things. First, I've had some people on the podcast that said that influencer marketing was all about volume. It was as many creators as you can work with, do it. I've also sometimes heard a slightly different approach that's maybe a bit more niche and targeted. In which camp do you sit in, and why?
Yeah, I think it really depends on kind of where you're at on in scaling your influencer program. But I do agree that you have to have somewhat of a diversified portfolio in any given month if you're going to be judged on a month's performance. So I would never recommend paying, one influencer your entire budget and just praying. Don't do the blow it all on a Kardashian model. I would not recommend that one. So from that perspective, I think volume and enough volume to have enough diversification probably makes sense. I probably wouldn't put more than
Right.
20% of my budget in any individual in any given month. But that having been said, once your program takes off and you're figuring out which influencers to rebook, I think can become a little bit more scientific and mathematical, and you can use past performance to somewhat predict future results. And
Mm,
you should be using all those data points to then, reevaluate which influencers to continue working on. And one benefit of working with an agency, for example, is that they have that data across multiple clients. And obviously, the more data, the better. It tends to be the case that creators that perform for one brand will perform for another brand also, and vice versa. Ones that don't drive revenue won't work for other brands either.
mm,
Um, so, institutional knowledge can play a big role in helping evaluate as well.
yeah. We'll get back to the agency bit because I do want to touch base on that. But one thing we never really addressed on the podcast is the question of frequency, right? When it comes to Meta, right, the concept of ad frequency is very much talked about. But when it comes to influencer impressions or just which influencer we work with, that is something that I haven't heard a lot of people talk about. So, what are your thoughts here? Is it better to work with new influencer every time? Is there a percentage of new influencers that you try to work with every month? When do you rework with the same influencers? Ultimately, let's talk frequency. What do you think?
Yeah, I love talking frequency, and I'm really glad you brought it up.
Yeah.
People don't talk about it nearly enough, and I think it's one of the most important inputs in your overall marketing mix. And getting it right, there's nothing that can do more to improve your efficiency than getting that right. Unfortunately, this is one of those cases where you're not going to be able to test and get really precise. And I think at the end of the day, it comes down to your customer journey. So, and your product and the frequency with which your product is purchased. So we're really a one-time purchase. You're only going to buy one crib mattress for each baby you have, unless maybe you have a vacation house. But generally speaking, our entire customer base turns over every 3 to 4 months, because once you outfit your nursery, you're done. And so generally speaking, we follow that cadence with our frequency for our influencers. Now, obviously, we have very different frequency for Facebook and YouTube and our other channels because it'll take more than one impression typically to really make sure that you get in someone's mind. But creators are more expensive, certainly on a CPM basis or CPC, which however you look at it. And you don't need the same person talking about your brand 30 times a month, whereas you might on Facebook, especially for a considered purchase.
Hmm.
And especially given that influencer is very top of funnel for us. So uh, yeah, we just match it to our kind of customer funnel. And if it takes on average about a month to 2 months to work through the funnel, we want to make sure that we're not necessarily doubling up with the same creator. I'm happy to hit them with different creators, and that happens
Yep.
all the time. But generally, we don't want the same creator pitching the same product to the same customer more than once in their journey. So that's why we
Hmm.
typically will rework every 3 to 4 months with the same influencer.
Okay, very interesting. I'm also wondering about kind of the types of influencers, right? So obviously you have different sizes, but I'm also thinking you may have different segments of influencers. I know you're always targeting mom and kind of the baby and the kid angle, but you also have different product lines. I mean, you even have pet products, right?
Yeah.
Um, so what is the strategy for do you group or segment influencers in separate categories? Are they grouped or segmented by size, by type? What's the strategy there?
Yeah, this is an interesting one, and as a quantity guy, one that I've been trying to really grok forever. And unfortunately, there isn't a really great way to do it. We found that basically the ability to drive revenue or call it persuasiveness is a much larger determinant of performance than category. And so we've had like nutrition influencers drive a ton more actual performance and revenue than
Mm,
mom influencers. And it really just comes down to how credible they are to their base. There's a little bit of correlation with engagement, so engagement tends to be a great metric to look at overall. But yeah, I mean, we've had mom influencers who drove more pet beds than dog influencers. And I mean, in the early days, we really did a ton of regression analyses on category. And we saw some categories where there was really poor performance. So typically, bikini models weren't awesome at driving crib mattresses. But that was like one
interesting.
of the few cases where, we stopped working with bikini model like that, like literally. But otherwise, we really didn't find much category correlation.
Hmm. Um, how do you decide which influencers to work with? Like, let's go back to the metrics, right? Eh, are you looking at engagement rates? Are you just looking at kind of the overall types of followers that they get? What are kind of those guidelines and metrics that you look at when deciding to create influencer campaigns?
Yeah, so there's a couple different vectors. First of all, they have to be large enough to at least get a free product from us. Our products are expensive, so if we're sending a $300 crib mattress, we need to make sure that there's at least the possibility of enough impressions to offset the cost of sending that
Right.
product. So that's
Uh,
that's certainly like the bare minimum.
just quick question there. How do you determine large enough? I'm sure it's different from brand to brand, and obviously, as you said, based on your AOV. But what is that definition?
It's basically just expected view count, and then we convert it to CPM, and what will we
Understood.
get in other channels for the CPM? Yeah.
Great.
So that's the first step. The second step is typically, especially on the macros, the agency will pitch someone, and if they're net new to us, it means typically that they've driven performance for their other brands. I mean, it could be someone that they're just trying out for the first time with us as well. And we have, a huge budget at this point. So in our diversified portfolio, I'm happy if 10% are totally new people that we're just trying out. Even if they all zero out, we're going to be fine. So they'll pitch someone. And then the third vector is brand safety. And this is a big
Mm,
one, and it's been a huge issue for us. So we need to vet the heck out of these people. We are a science-driven company, so we need to make sure that generally the things that creators are saying and have promoted or whatever else are in line with best practices according to pediatricians
yep.
and the current state of pediatric medicine. And so we also need to make sure that there's brand safety there. So we tend to stay away from controversy, from, kind of outrageous claims, inappropriate behavior, criminal records. Um, because anytime we've worked with someone who is more controversial or does something inappropriate or counter to modern science, we get boycotts. So
Hmm.
it's like,
Not ideal.
the cancel culture, it's like, oh my gosh, Newton worked with so and so, they're anti-vac, vaccine, we should all boycott Newton Baby. And it's like, oh boy. So now we have to come out and say we weren't aware of these views, whatever it is,
Right.
and distance ourselves and publicly state that we're not going to work with this person again. So we really do a lot of background checking and vetting, and it's a really manual, intensive process. But doing it properly ensures that we avoid a lot of controversy and potential boycotts and cancel culture in general.
Makes sense. Um, uh, we're almost out of time, but I do have one last question for you because you touched on doing some of your influencer marketing activities in house and some are outsourced to an agency. What ultimately is the method and the rationale behind this? When do you give it to the agency? What do you do in house? Why? Um, love for you to chat a little bit about that.
Yeah, so basically the inbound influencers are the micros, and we just handle them in-house. We have a very pretty clear flowchart process that we work through to vet them and see, like we said, if they're big enough to support sending free product to. It's a fairly streamlined process, and there's not much benefit to outsourcing that. We can do it more cheaply and quickly and effectively than an agency.
Hmm.
For the macros, which generally is anyone over 50,000 or so followers that we're going to make a significant payment to. Um, I really like having that institutional knowledge. They can pool their learnings across multiple clients and really understand which influencers are driving performance.
Right.
Even like I said, if they're not category specific, maybe there is an architectural influencer that works really well for a couch company. Chances are they're going to work well for us. So I like having that institutional knowledge. And once an influencer stops performing for some of the other brands, they'll stop rebooking them for us as well. And that's why I like agencies in general. Institutional knowledge is always gonna, be more robust than our individual knowledge working with individual creators.
Yeah, definitely. We've been talking with Aaron Zagha, who's the CMO of Newton. Now, Aaron, thank you so much for all these insights, your knowledge. Now, if people want to connect with you, check out the brand, right? Where should they go? What should they do?
LinkedIn's always the best place to get me. I respond to pretty much all my messages there. And you can go to newtonbaby.com to check out the site.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks.